We're here at Frieden's Cemetery in St. Louis, Missouri today to bring you the true story of one of the most terrifying novels and movies ever made. So for our exit today, we start with a woman that basically created one of the scariest incidences in history. What I mean by incidences is it was a true story that developed into a book and movie that elicited fears in people that they didn't even know existed at the time. We're here on a rainy, gloomy day, no sunshine in sight, to visit one particular woman by the name of Matilda Tilly Hendricks, otherwise known as Aunt Tilly for the sake of our story. So Aunt Tilly died in January of 1949. But before she passed away with multiple sclerosis, according to her death certificate, she paid a visit to some family members in Maryland. Now, for the beginning of this video, we're gonna say the name of this family member as the alias that he was given, Ronald Doe. On this particular visit, she taught Ronald, her nephew, how to use and play with the Ouija board. The reason for this was Aunt Tilly was a spiritualist. And what that means is they believe that when they die, their spirit leaves the body and goes into the spirit realm. And you can reach out and still communicate with those that have left. So this was Ronald's favorite aunt. So of course, when the family received news that Aunt Tilly had passed, it shocked them, and he wanted to reach out and still communicate with Aunt Tilly. The next stop we're taking you to is on 8435 Roanoke Drive. Now, I know I said that Ronald Doe lived in Maryland, but he started experiencing things that led him to St. Louis. Ronald Doe was at the age of 14 when he started hearing knocks and scratches on the walls in his bedroom.
Yeah, rats.
Maybe. But that wasn't what this was, because objects started flying too. So the family contacted their family minister, told him about everything that was happening. He got in touch with some other people. They went through all the proper channels of their religion, of putting him through all these tests and everything, and ended up contacting a whole bunch of other religious individuals to help with the situation. They thought it was classic poltergeist activity.
Naturally.
But it proved to be a little bit more than just that. Now, keep in mind before, when we were visiting Aunt Tilly's grave, Aunt Tilly had passed not long before this. So here you have Ronald. He's equipped with how to use the Ouija board, and he's attempting to contact his favorite aunt that had just died shortly before all of this started happening. Well, it's been thought that maybe Ronald let something else in, not the presence of, a loved one such as Aunt Tilly, but something evil. The family thought they needed to come to St. Louis to kind of take care of this, and this so happened to be where Aunt Tilly lived. And the presence inside of Ronald Doe seemed to agree with the decision to come to St. Louis, because the words Louis were scratched on the boy's rib cage. So there come a question of when they were actually going to make the trip here. So shortly after, the words Saturday were scratched on the boy's hip. And then it was kind of like, well, how long will we be there? And then across his chest, 3.5 was scratched. So the thing inside of him was giving him a location, a time to leave, and a time frame to be here. Pretty convenient. He did actually end up being here for about a month and underwent like about 20 exorcisms.
All right, guys, so the northwest second story window would be that one right back there. That was where Ronald stayed. You see this street lamp right here, right? It's the only one of its kind on this road. If you notice, there's nothing down there, and there's nothing in this direction. It's the only street lamp. What makes it even better is this unique looking lamp is right across the road from the Exorcist house. It also looks exactly like the one that's the iconic shot for the cover of the movie where the priest is standing there about to go in the house. It's just weird that this is the only one on the street and it's right in front of the house.
For the next stop, we're at St. Louis University, more specifically, St. Francis Xavier College Church. And I realize up until this point, we haven't really given you any details on the men that actually exorcised this teenage boy.
So as far as the exorcism events that took place in St. Louis, there's pretty much 3 main priests that are involved. So the first one that shows up at the house on Roanoke would be a Father Bishop. So he shows up. He was a professor at the St. Louis University at the time. But when he showed up, he blessed the entire house before he even entered the bedroom with Ronald Doe. And instantly noticed the bed was shaking. Ronald was showing signs of possession. So that's when he recruits Father Bowdern. And Bowdern was the priest residing at the church that we're at now. And so when Father Bowdern is recruited, he also takes up Father Halloran. But at the time, Father Halloran was still, he was in his late 20s, 27, and he was still a history student at the college. But he was real athletic, apparently pretty strong, and so it was thought that he would be useful as a tag-along in case they needed some muscle to restrain Ronald Doe in case things started getting violent. So he was pretty much meant to be the muscle while the other 2 did the exorcism rites.
So when Ronald was brought here to this church, it's reported online that he was brought to a building in the back of the church called the rectory. Now, since this was 1949, that rectory since has been torn down and a new one put in its place. So what you're looking at in front of you is actually supposedly where he was held. He was only here for a short amount of time before he was transferred to St. Francis Xavier College Church Parish Center. Now, even though this is a new building, it's still crazy to think that right here on this property. Something so famous that would inspire such a terrifying movie took place here. What you're looking at now is South City Hospital, which just announced this month that they're closing their doors. You can see a whole row of windows on the bottom that are boarded up now. So this location changed names. This is actually their third name. But for the sake of our video, this is the location of the Alexian Brothers Hospital. Now, the building you're looking at is not the original Alexian Brothers Hospital. But if you look just in front, beyond that black gate, there's a parking lot. That's where the original Alexian Brothers Hospital once stood.
So, like we said, just on the other side of this wall used to stand the Alexian Brothers Hospital. The Alexian Brothers was like an organization, right? That was rooted in Catholicism. So they would have been like, you know, the Shriners Hospital where they take care of the sick, because that's what they did. They took care of the sick more so than, you know, the spiritual side. But they were founded, you know, back during the 13th century during the bubonic plague, which would be a good time to really get started because it's a lot of sick people. Anyway, but the thing is, they mostly took care of men, not really so much the women.
He was actually placed on the psychiatric portion of the hospital to kind of finish the exorcism. They continued it here, and you know, they had hopes of taking him out of the house that he originally started in St. Louis to maybe get things better, and it just continued to get worse, basically.
So I guess maybe they thought back then that if they brought him to a hospital that was rooted in Catholicism, that it would be better care than going to a normal hospital and everything, because they would kind of have, you know, the medical staff, but also the spiritual staff to help with that. That makes sense. Okay.
On April 18th, 1949, our Ronald Doe woke up here at the hospital, kind of like in a fit, where he was hollering, you know, basically continuing what he had already been doing with the possession. So Bowdern came in and continued his work with the exorcism, placed religious objects in the boy's hand and around his neck. And this is basically the day where they freed him. So Bishop had this journal that he had started, you know, writing all the accounts of basically the whole process of this exorcism. And within the journal, on this particular day, he had written that Bowdern had asked for the name of the demon that was inside of Ronald Doe. And to which he got back some mocking. And I'm just going to read this because this is from the journal. It says, he has to say one more word. One little word, I mean one big word. He'll never say it. I am always in him. I may not have much power always, but I am in him. He will never say that word. They continued to work throughout the day. Shortly before midnight came the next diary entry, to which it said, Satan, Satan, I am Saint Michael, and I command you, Satan, and the other evil spirits to leave the body in the name of Dominus immediately, now, now, now. And that's when our Ronald Doe woke up and said he's gone. Okay. Now, he had reported after telling them that he was gone, he said that he had had a dream that Saint Michael, the archangel, had battled the devil and the demons to free him.
So this building right here is across from where the old hospital was, just behind me, which is where the new hospital they just closed down is also sitting. After Josh went and got the security guard out front, she was telling us that according to the staff that used to work at this hospital, this building right here, along with potentially that building down there, was actually one of the potential spots for the actual exorcism. Not actually taking place in the parking lot area where the hospital used to sit, but instead he was actually held here or here, which that one looks a little newer. This one looks more like it was probably around during the 20s, 30s, 40s, during the time of the actual exorcism. So who knows?
So what makes me think maybe what you read online about the building being in the current parking lot is true is because a lot of times, or a lot of things read that there was a construction worker that was working on when the building was getting torn down, and he actually found Bishop's diary because after the exorcism was completed, he placed his diary in a drawer in the room. They sealed the room. It was not opened anymore. So when they were tearing all this down, it was found. He turned it over to the hospital, and then the hospital later gave the diary back to the church. So that makes me think maybe it was in the parking lot. I've also read that they placed furniture that was in the old hospital in the basement of the new one. I don't know if that's true, but the security guard also did say that a lot of the security have reported creepy things in the basement. They can't confirm that furniture is still down there, but this was the 40s. Maybe it was down there and then got moved. But nonetheless, creepy things happen. Like they see shadow figures down there. They see, or they hear screams. So who knows? Yeah, and she said it's a pretty large basement too, so potentially if it wasn't moved out, it could still be down there, and just far in the back where nobody has actually went and looked. I mean, if you're security and you know it's boarded up and there's cameras everywhere and you're watching the place, then you know nobody's breaking in to get down there, so why would you go in the basement to check every little nook and cranny down there, you know? So, but one extremely interesting thing that she did let us know is that since they're selling the property, they are trying to get all of the statues, the religious statues, moved to like a historical place. They're coming to get all those and, you know, basically so they don't get destroyed and they're kept safe and all that. There's one particular statue still in this building that was in the actual room of the exorcism. And it has a broken, looks like index finger. So it would be like that. And it's made out of wood. So that's a lot of force to break that off. And she said that finger got broke
during the exorcism.
So She was kind enough to go inside, even though it freaked her out tremendously. She said, I'm more of an outside person. I don't go in there because it freaks me out. But she was kind enough to go into the hospital, take a couple of pictures for us, and we're going to insert those right now for you to see. The final stop in our Exorcist video takes us to Calvary Cemetery. After Ronald Doe was freed of the darkness that was within him, he went on to lead a normal life, so to speak. I guess for as normal as you could lead with things like that happening to you. So I think it's time we say his real name. His name was Ronald Hunkler. He died a few years ago at the age of 85 by a stroke, but he was extremely smart. Like, he worked for NASA and did all this amazing stuff, but he also lived in constant fear that his identity would be learned by like colleagues, and so he would always like leave his house on Halloween just because he was scared of being found out. Because for a long time the church like sealed the name of the boy all this happened to. Nobody knew his true identity. And then somehow it came out. This is who it was. The Exorcist story that most of the world knows was created by a man named William Peter Blatty. He originally wrote a novel that came out in 1971 that was turned into a film in 1973.
When I was a sophomore at Georgetown University, read a story in the Washington Post about a young man living in the area who supposedly had been possessed and exorcised. And I determined at that time, I was so fascinated by it, so I set out to find the exorcist in the case I had heard about when I was at Georgetown. And I did. His name was Father William F. Bowdern. And he was eager to cooperate with me, but he went to his archbishop, and he wrote back to me that they couldn't get it, that he could tell me nothing. But he could tell me one thing. At the end of his letter, he said, I can tell you one thing. The case I was involved with was the real thing. I had no doubt about it then. I have no doubt about it now.
When the Exorcist movie came out, nobody was expecting it. It terrified people. It terrified them that the thought of the devil or something so evil could come into their homes. A lot of people threw up, left the theater, and a lot rushed to the local church to ask forgiveness for their sins. There were a few differences between the real life story and the film adaptation that we all know. Of course, you have Ronald Hunkler being a 14-year-old boy, whereas in the film, he's portrayed by 12-year-old Reagan. All right, just over to our left, you'll find the rows of the headstones for the nuns. And we're just gonna pan over toward the right, just in front of us. Those rows are where the priests rest. Now, I know for our story, we named 3 different priests, but there's only one buried here that remained in St. Louis. Father Halloran is actually buried in Wisconsin. And Bishop is buried in Nebraska. Now the headstones for the priests are all in order from the year they died. Here in about the middle of all the priest plaques, He'll find the final resting place of Reverend William S. Bowdern, 1897 to 1983.
All right, guys. Well, that does it for this exit of the real life Exorcist. So, major thing I want to point out is this hair color. Isn't it pretty? So, we've had to do this video over 2 different days in a long span, because when we were up here last time filming the rest of it, the cemetery where Bowdern was buried.
Bowdern.
The cemetery that he's buried in, Calvary here in St. Louis, was closed for, I think they were remodeling something or doing some landscape work. Anyway, it was closed. We couldn't get in last time, so we had to come back in order to properly finish the story. That's why there's 2 different hair colors in the video. I just want to point that out.
Yeah. I didn't just like visit the graveyard and get a hair color while I was here.
It's not a wig. I mean, it's real. So
They could probably see my roots now. It's been that long.
all right. Anything last words, Dad?
Keep it spooky.
Later.